We're talking about daddy deprivation. We're talking about restoring fatherhood and talking about our community as well and black fatherhood. And that points towards where I am as a black father. And I want to highlight that we looked last week at how Jesus talks about God being our Father and just really sets a tone for how to see God. And when I looked at it, I also looked at the idea of the tenderness of God. When Jesus then opens up this conversation of the tenderness of God, we forget it sometimes because we always look at the wrath and the strength and the power and the glory of God. And those things are the strong things. But we forget about the tenderness of God, the love of God, that enables people to be refreshed. So on this program on Affinity Xtra, where we do extraordinary things, you're listening to Rock Solid, and we're trying to get some solid ground to put our feet in a present condition that we are in. And so we have also challenges that come into families now. Families that are same-sex marriage families we've got now. So we've got blended families, we've got LGBT families, we've got all kinds of families rolling out there. And sometimes in there you find that still the children are asking the question, how does my father fit into this role? When you have maybe two lesbian parents, or maybe you have two gay men parents, and maybe you have no parents whatsoever. The children just grow on their own. They're in their children's center. And recently there's been a major scandal, not only in Lambeth, but many places across the country, where the children's centers have been places of abuse, places of racism, places of wicked oppression of the children. And sometimes you look at this and you realize that the fatherhood of God is this idea of God being the protector. But then this is the modern question that people ask themselves: where was God when I needed to be protected? Where was God when I needed to be protected? And that was the challenge that we find in many of our children's lives. And so why is it that now in this era where there is more help that is needed from God, that there are so many children without their fathers? You know, the Apostle Paul speaks about this adoption that God gives us, the adoption into his family, where we can cry. It says where we can cry, Abba, Father. And so why is this interesting to us now? Because there is this role that fatherhood does that is unique to the family. You have the motherhood role, you have the fatherhood role, you have the children's role as well. And then you also have this dynamic of father to children, children to mother, mother to father. And this circle of relationship here is the health of the family. The father is the role that God gives to replenish, to organize, to structure, to work, and to build, and to wrap the family around with strength. That's what God puts this Adamic man, this man he calls the father of the home, or the husband man. And so when we look at back to our book here now, and he points out that there are certain challenges to fatherhood today. He talks about the challenge of gay parenthood, and he talks about the challenge of single motherhood, and he challenged the challenges of also looking at how children look at this figure of a father and what they're looking for as a response. So he then gives us a statistic from 1995, which can be pretty old, but we perhaps need to reflect on this statistic because then it can bring into our understanding of where we are now. This may be US statistics, so I might need to get a British statistic here, if I can keep my false teeth in. So this reflection is about how we've moved on. And so it says in 1995, 48.3 million of 70.3 million children under the age of 18 live with two parents, 69%. 18.9 million lived with only one parent, 27%. 3 million live with neither parent, that was 4%. Of children living with one parent, 38% lived with a divorced parent, 35% with a never married parent, 19% with a separated parent, and 4% with a widowed parent, and 4% with a parent whose spouse lived elsewhere because of business or some other reason. 4 million children lived in homes of their grandparents. 11% of them, both parents were also in the household. For 52%, one parent was there, and 37%, neither parent was present. Most single parent children lived in metropolitan areas, 14.5 million, and 6 in 10 of them, 9.2 million, are in cities with populations of over 1 million. And so that's given a statistic of how many, which is quite a large statistic there. He also talks about this one because there's this is the challenge as well. Thugs. He puts it under thugs. In inner city community, fatherlessness is heightened for a number of reasons, including crime, cultural socialization, economic depression, and the ratio of men to women, imprisonment. Philadelphia, for example, is estimated to consist of 90% of single parent homes. Mothers in Section 8 projects and rental properties fight to raise their children to live beyond the context of their community. But even if they escape, the father wounds plague the psyche of the boys trying to make sense of themselves in the locale where survival is paramount. And so Cornel West gives us a comment on this, and he says that it's a concrete jungle where you have to survive to live, and so it is a dog-eat-dog environment. And I think that when we would used to listen to ska, they used to talk about the urban areas and talk about concrete jungle. So this talks about this urban mixing, this urban melting pot of struggle that children go through. I'm going to read another section, then we can come a conversation on it. The images of manhood are limited to the TV and the neighborhood, both of which tend to portray manhood as thuggish. And in these neighborhoods, thugs are also looked up for their knack of being able to navigate the harsh terrain of the hood. Observing this, boys desire the same level of prowess. Thugs then become viable candidates for a predominant image of manhood. In their own way, each of these situations is an effort to fulfill the void of the absent fathers, and in each case, the replacement falls dramatically short of what God originally intended, and it is to this original intent we turn to next. And that's what he talks about, this intending to be in fatherhood. And so the next part of this focus now is to ask the question, what has God intended for fatherhood? God intends for fatherhood to grow the family in the way that he presents it in Genesis 2:24. Is this domination of the world? Is this organizing of the world? Is this subduing of everything around him, and also making a place of healthiness for his family? That's what the father's role is about. It's about covering wife in priesthood, as we talk about in a biblical context. And in a general context, it's about this major stand of strength and support for the rest of the family. And so why do we say this? Because the family is the rock bed of society. And without the family, you do not have a society. And so when we look at how our fathers handled our homes, they were figures to admire, to respect, to honor. But when your father is not there, you have no person to reflect on, to respect, and to honor. When you see the fault lines in them, you are almost going to either mimic the image before you, or you are going to reject the image totally and have nothing to do with proper fatherhood. And so these are the challenges that we have today. And so what are we saying to each other now? It is a new day to now try and transform, try to do our best to speak to the father that is now has the opportunity, but does not understand how to take the opportunity. I'm going to say to the fathers who feel broken by their previous fatherhood experience, I think that one of the key things that you need to do is culturally step into a Sankofa situation. Ask yourself the question, why is fatherhood so strong in the African community? Let's talk about this Sankofa situation. Can we go back into our ancestry and see something great? Sankofa says you see something great and you bring it into where we are now. If our ancestors were prepared to fight enslavers, wrestle with colonialism, wrestle with transatlantic slavery, and still be the kings and queens, our ancestors of the earth that grew and fought for their children and prepared to sacrifice themselves for the children, there is something great that we can glean from that. And so our model now is to become a village again where fathers teach sons how to be good fathers. And so one of the key areas I would say to you is, one, you need a fatherhood mentor, a fatherhood mentor. And that mentor needs to be somebody who helps you navigate your way through having your own balance of fatherhood. You're going to have to admit to yourself, if you have failed in your fatherhood in the past, that you have failed. And you're going to have to turn around to your children and remind them and tell them that you admit that you have failed, but you are prepared to do something about it. If you've abused their mother or your partner, you're going to have to now repent of that and turn away from the abuse and start to recognize that because you are damaged, you are doing damage. And that is going to be something that you now move not only away from, but you seek to be healed from. I believe that God is the healer of damaged fatherhood. I believe that God is the focus of great fatherhood. And some people say, well, there's also motherhood that can fit that. But I believe that Jesus gives us a model of God's fatherhood that is amazing. This fatherhood says to us that there is no way that he would allow his children to fall. And so fatherhood is God's design. Go back to the God who designed the fatherhood. And that's why I'm saying that faith in Jesus Christ is a paramount part of your transformation. Secondly, it is this model of practice. The model of practice is working how you discipline your life on a daily basis. And that is going to be the next step of your power as a father. James says this, faith without works is dead. And so instead of just talking, now it's time for you to act. Don't make promises to your children and your spouse that you're not going to fulfill. Yes, you must over-deliver. But sometimes you need to under-promise. Yeah, make sure you know that Bishop give you that advice. Under-promise and over-deliver. Okay? So that when you get into delivering, they don't think, well, you said you were going to do more than this. The impact of daddy deprivation means that you need this God to move into your life to transform you into something that God is proud to see. Remember, fatherhood is God's beautiful design. And the presence of fatherhood in a child's life is healing to them because it is God's design and structure for them. So as we go a little bit further, what we also want to say is we're going to now try to navigate our way now into building our strong family base. And so thank you so much for listening to the couple of parts where I conversate. I didn't tell you about my own fatherhood, which I'm so pleased to be the father of 2 girls. Hey, I'd just like to do a tribute, just to remind myself of my own papa, Isaiah Rupert Jackson. Man, when I think about my dad, I think about even stories that people tell me about my dad, about how he was that guy who would lead the children to school in a line. He would ride a bike. Somebody told me that when they were children, my dad would ride a bike and the kids would follow him to school. He would carry them to school. And for many years, he was always that person who all children in church could call Uncle Jenkins, Daddy Jackson. And so his fatherhood of me was sometimes tough because I was out of order pickaninny. He had to clap me up sometimes to give me some straightness. That's why I'm a straight, sensible somebody right now, because he never spared the rod and spoiled the child. But, I think when I got into when I started working with him when I was 14, I think he started to spoil me then, really. Because then, my dad used to just basically realize that manhood comes from mentoring and practice. And what my dad did with me is that when we were about 11 or 12, when we just kick football and run street, kick football, run street, he decided, no, you're not kicking football and just running street. You are coming to work to learn some trade and principle. So we went to work with Papa, and we just learned stuff at work, So yes, we did ramp still, but we learned stuff at work, me and my brothers, and therefore I can decorate my own house if I need to, unless I'm tired. So one of the things that I would say is that was mentoring, it was camaraderie, it was presence. And as my dad became an older man, it just grew into just a deep love until, I lost him at 49 and I felt like I was 9. I went back to like my childhood when my dad left the earth. I felt like, oh my God, my dad has left the earth. What am I going to do? And then I had to come back into myself, almost like, and recognize that he'd poured everything into me for 49 years. I'm on my feet. I'm a strong father myself. And so in my fatherhood, I've recognized that there is not every answer that you have in your head. There are some situations that God helps you deal with. And then other situations that God gives you the wisdom to conversate with your children. I always say, I've been always a constant presence to my children. I'm never missing. If it's school, I pick them up. If it's an issue at school, I go down. I don't ever miss those situations. The only situations I miss is if they're going now, because they're big women, to hairdo, this and that, and nails and all of that. That's them and them mother. I have to run away from that now. I've done my duties in the early days. What I've hoped is that I've placed in my children a model of fatherhood as well, because my daddy placed a model of fatherhood in me. And therefore I give honor to my dad, Isaiah Rupert Jackson, who passed away about 3 years ago now, but it feels like yesterday. But I just want to say that I thank God for his wonderful fatherhood of me that makes me the man who I am. And hopefully, God willing, we as a church structure would now start to answer some questions on fatherhood and become stronger in this challenge of being the gap that being in the gap to fill in for guys who do not have a father with them. Hey, this is Bishop Jackson on Affinity Xtra, where we do extraordinary things. You are listening to Rock Solid, where we're having a conversation about fatherhood, black fatherhood, fatherhood in general as well, culturally trying to focus on what we need to do to strengthen that. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Visit us for updates and shows at affinityextra.co.uk.